Have you ever wondered, what if the most powerful response you could ever give was no response at all? No text, no explanations, no look at what you lost posts, just silence. Not the kind of silence that's passive or wounded, but the kind that is chosen, intentional, full of meaning. Think about it for a moment. Why do some men not feel regret after walking away? Why do they seem unfazed, even stronger, when you're the one left hurting? And why does it feel like the more you try to explain, the less they seem to care? Now flip the question. What if disappearing calmly, without a word, leaves a deeper impression than any outburst ever could? Carl Jung, one of the most influential minds in psychology, once said, "The unconscious reacts not to what is said, but to what is missing." That means your silence isn't empty. It's a message. It's a mirror. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop chasing, you create a space where he has to sit with himself. And in that silence, that's where regret begins to grow. In this video, I'm not going to teach you how to manipulate him. I'm not going to give you tricks or lines to make him jealous. That's not what we do here. What I will share is how to use conscious silence, not as a weapon, but as a reflection of your worth, your boundaries, your inner peace. Because the woman who knows how to walk away without noise, without drama, without turning her pain into performance, she's not forgotten. She's remembered. Often too late. So if you've ever thought, how do I make him regret losing me without saying a word? This might be the conversation your heart's been waiting for. And if something in these words resonates with you, if it feels like I've put a voice to what you've been carrying silently, consider subscribing. Not for numbers, but because this space, this presence, exists to honor the quiet truths we rarely say out loud. Welcome to Side Depth. Let's begin. Have you ever asked yourself why he doesn't regret losing you? It's one of the most painful questions a woman can carry. It haunts the quiet spaces in the middle of the night when your hand reaches for a phone you promised you wouldn't touch again, when your chest tightens at the sound of a song that once belonged to both of you, when the silence between you grows louder than his absence. It feels unnatural, unfair, almost cruel, how he seems to move on so effortlessly, laughing, living, sharing, forgetting, as if what you shared was disposable, as if you were the only one who ever stayed up wondering, did any of it mean something? But here's a truth we don't often speak aloud. Regret doesn't begin the moment you leave. It doesn't start when you block him, cry, or disappear from his feed. Regret begins when he no longer hears your energy, not your voice, not your words, your energy. Because most women don't truly leave. They leave with their words, but not their presence. They leave the relationship, but not the emotional space. They say goodbye, but their pain still speaks in invisible ways. A man does not regret a woman who is still orbiting his life, even if she's doing it silently. You see, a man can still feel your grief. He can still feel your desire for him to come back. He senses the longing in your silence. He hears the way your energy still knocks on the door. Carl Jung taught us something powerful. We don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. What does this mean for heartbreak? It means the unconscious mind reacts more strongly to what is no longer there than to what is still lingering in some form. As long as you remain accessible, even emotionally, he will not feel the vacuum of your absence. He will not hear the silence because you're still there, between the words in the background behind the scenes. You may not be calling, but your pain is still speaking. And as long as you are still speaking, he is still safe. Men are not taught to deal with emotional voids. They aren't trained to sit with loss, so they don't react until the void becomes undeniable, until the energy completely vanishes, until the echo fades. Think of it this way. Imagine leaving a room, but leaving behind your perfume, your voice, your shadow. He walks in and you're gone, but it still feels like you're there. He doesn't miss you yet, because your essence still fills the room. And in that essence, he is comfortable. He can pretend. He can believe the door is still half open. But when the scent fades, when the sound of your voice no longer lingers in his thoughts, when you become just space, just emptiness, just absence. That's when something happens. Something burns. It's slow, it's quiet, but it's real. His psyche begins to stir, because something familiar has disappeared. And not just your body, but your meaning. Jung said, man needs difficulties. They are necessary for health. The difficulty of your total absence, not your punishment, not your manipulation, but your sacred retreat, becomes the very friction that confronts his unconscious. He starts to ask, where is she? Not physically, energetically, psychically. And because there's no trace of you anymore, he begins to notice what he once took for granted. But here's the part that's hardest to swallow. If you are still reacting to him, still checking his social media, still hoping he notices your stories, still crying over old photos, still texting and deleting, then you haven't really left. You are still available in his emotional field, and because you are there, he doesn't have to grieve. He doesn't have to feel the loss, because nothing has really been taken. This is why so many men don't regret losing someone, until much later, until long after you've emotionally detached, until you've healed enough to stop waiting, until your heart beats for something beyond him. When you stop performing your pain, when your suffering no longer serves as proof of love, when your silence is no longer a strategy, but a truth, that is when he feels the rupture. That is when he realizes, you're gone, not just absent, gone. And the mind doesn't process gone easily. It scrambles, it denies, it distracts. But the soul knows, and somewhere deep inside him, he begins to mourn the woman who once stood open-hearted at the door, but now is nowhere to be found. This is not a story of revenge. It's not about playing games. It's not about making him chase you. It's about reclaiming your psychic real estate, about taking your energy out of his emotional economy, about recognizing that your love was not a loan, it was a gift. And now, the gift is gone. Jung believed in the power of withdrawal, not as punishment, but as transformation. He taught that the psyche evolves through death and rebirth. When a woman withdraws, truly, not in bitterness, but in self-possession, she creates the space for a man to encounter his own inner void. And that is where regret begins. Not in her sadness, not in her anger, not even in her goodbye, but in the empty space she no longer fills. In the quiet her voice used to light up. In the mirror that no longer reflects him. He begins to ask, was she ever really mine? Did I really see her? Why do I feel less now that she's gone? This is not a fairy tale. Not all men will return. Not all men will apologize. Not all men will awaken. But the truth remains. No one regrets losing what they believe they still have access to. So when you ask, why doesn't he regret it? You must also ask, where is my energy right now? Am I still available to him in ways I don't realize? Have I truly left the emotional stage, or am I hiding in the curtains, waiting for him to look back? Your heartbreak does not become a catalyst for his regret until it stops being his safety net. And when that happens, something ancient stirs in the masculine, a knowing, a memory, a recognition of the sacred, because the deepest regret is not losing a woman's attention, it's realizing her energy no longer belongs to you, and that is a loss no distraction can replace. So remember this, regret doesn't come when he hears your sorrow. It comes when he can't find your echo, not because you screamed, not because you left a dramatic message, but because you walked away with such quiet certainty that even his soul went silent. That is when the regret begins. And here are the practical steps that reflect Carl Jung's timeless insight. If you're going to disappear, don't just vanish. Let your absence become symbolic. A woman's silence, when grounded in meaning, speaks louder than any confrontation. Step 1. Detach with emotional elegance. This means you leave, not in anger, not in desperation, but with an inner stillness that confuses the masculine mind. Men are conditioned to expect emotional reactions. Tears, accusations, chaos. But when none of that comes, when you simply withdraw with grace, something inside him becomes deeply unsettled. Not because you begged for attention, but because you didn't. Jung taught that what is not expressed verbally often becomes more powerful symbolically. So your silence becomes a mirror, and when he looks into it, he doesn't see you, he sees himself, stripped of control. Step 2. Master the art of unpredictability. When he can no longer predict your next move, when you become emotionally unavailable in a way that isn't hostile but sovereign, he loses the narrative he built about you. You're no longer the woman trying to be chosen, you are the woman who remembered she could choose herself. Jung believed that true transformation begins when the persona, the mask we wear for others, breaks. And in this moment, yours is removed. You're not performing, you're not reacting, you're not proving, you are simply being. Step 3. Allow silence to become your presence. This isn't just about not speaking, it's about letting the space you once filled become a void he cannot unfeel. It's about letting the memory of you grow louder in the absence of your voice. People think silence is emptiness, but Jung saw it as a container, a place where meaning multiplies. When you stop filling the air with explanations, he begins to hear everything he ignored while you were still there. The laughter, the softness, the loyalty, the essence. Regret doesn't always come like a lightning bolt. Sometimes it drips slowly into his consciousness, weeks or months later, when something ordinary reminds him of the peace he mistook for permanence. That's the fourth and final step. Do nothing to speed up his realization. Your job is not to manage his awakening, it's to stay rooted in your own. Jung warned us that chasing what wounds us is a form of self-abandonment. But choosing stillness, not silence out of fear, but silence out of awareness, that is power. It means you no longer operate on his emotional schedule. You've stepped into your own time. The beauty of this kind of withdrawal is that it doesn't scream. It echoes. It lingers. It becomes the sound of a door closing in his psyche, not with violence, but with inevitability. And someday, in a quiet moment when his world feels a little too loud, your absence will return, not to hurt him, but to remind him what presence once felt like. Not because you punished him, but because you outgrew him.
That is the kind of silence that makes a man regret everything he thought was ordinary about you.
In the end, you don't owe anyone a performance. Not him, not the world, not even the version of yourself that kept trying to be enough. You don't need to prove your worth, you don't need to chase closure, and you certainly don't need to make anyone realize what they failed to hold on to. Because the truth is, the people who couldn't see your value weren't ready for it, and that's not your fault. You loved, you showed up, you stayed soft in a world that often rewards hardness, and that alone makes you powerful. But now, it's no longer about who left or who stayed or who might come back. It's about coming back to you. There's a kind of silence that doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it just is. It speaks for you without words. It says, I remember who I am now, and I no longer need anyone else to mirror it back to me. He may never admit it, he may never say the words out loud, but deep down, one day, he'll feel it, not in the middle of a fight, but in the quiet after the noise fades, in the space where your energy used to be. He'll feel the echo of something real, not because you reminded him, but because you stopped trying to. He'll remember the softness he mistook for weakness, the silence that didn't mean surrender, and the presence that felt so natural he assumed it would always be there. But by then, you'll be long gone. Not bitter, not broken, just whole, just free. Because the woman he lost was never ordinary. She was the kind who didn't need to shout to be heard, who didn't need to stay to prove she cared, who didn't need to be seen to know her own worth. And if you've made it here, if these words feel like they're reaching some quiet corner of you, it's because you're remembering what you've always known deep down. You were never too much. You were just asking to be met where you live, in depth, in truth, in stillness. So keep going, keep healing, keep soft, keep grounded. Let your silence echo where your words once filled the gap. Let your absence speak in a language only the soul understands. And if this space, this voice feels like home in a world full of noise, then stay with us. Because here at Psi Depth, we don't offer noise. We offer depth, healing, and the kind of truth that doesn't ask for permission. You're not alone in this. Not ever.